Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and I wanted to address something really quick. I wanted to talk about this controversy at the University of Oklahoma. There's basically this issue with the SAE fraternity, Sigma Alpha Epsilon, where they were singing this chant. You probably heard the story. There'll never be a nigger in SAE, and then they said something about hanging black people from trees as part of the song, and it was caught on video. Which I'm glad that it was because uh, you know, we know that racism is real, but it's not that often that you get a chance to actually see uh, white people being racist. So it's always good to kind of dig into the moment when it happens. A couple of thoughts that I have on that. First of all, it's unfortunate that we still have a reactionary, very undisciplined approach to racism. We're not very proactive when it comes to dealing with racism. People who understand racism know that American racism is much deeper than just somebody calling you a nigger. It goes as deep as various forms of structural racism that exclude black people from opportunities. There's a reason why black people have the highest unemployment rate, the highest incarceration rate, the highest homicide rate, the greatest miseducation rate. We're at the bottom of the barrel in most indicators of quality of life, all the way from healthcare to everything else. And there's no effort to kind of fix that. And it's because we're not digging to the root of the issue. We're only dealing with these very blatant symptoms of the issue that we actually become a more racially sick country with each passing year. In fact, having a black president actually made America a more racist country. It's not blaming Obama for this, but it made us a more racist country because people said, well, we've got a black president, the black elite is doing well, therefore black people are doing fine, so what's the problem? So in a way, I almost compare it to someone having a really bad disease that's affecting their internal organs, but they only address the disease when it flares up. Maybe they get a rash, they put some ointment on the rash, or they get a cold sore and they put something on the cold sore or whatever, but they don't actually deal with the actual underlying disease that's eating away and rotting at their body. In fact, the more you address the superficial symptoms, the more likely you are to miss the real symptoms and the real causes of what's making you sick. And so by sort of isolating these white boys in SAE, and I knew the SAEs when I was at University of Kentucky, and the ones I knew were just pricks. They were pretty much entitled, very arrogant. The kinds of white males whose dads were gonna make them give them opportunities to run businesses one day or become judges or doctors or lawyers or whatever. And it's just sort of they were sort of a bastion of white privilege. But here's the thing: I don't. It's not that I don't think these kids deserve to be punished. Okay, fine, punish them if you want to. But if you don't really dig deeper and really think about, why are these white kids singing a song about hanging black people from trees without in the least bit feeling appalled by what they're saying? Why are they behaving this way? Well, they were probably drunk, number one. College students drink a lot of liquor, and let's be real, white people have a really interesting history when it comes to alcohol. I don't know if you know this. There's a really good documentary by Ken Burns called Prohibition, and I want to say in 1830, the average white American drank the equivalent of 88 bottles of whiskey per year. They actually spent more money on alcohol than the entire budget of the federal government. So whites and alcohol go way back. It doesn't excuse their behavior, of course, but it really reflects the very deep, persistent problem of drinking on college campuses. And I always say that, look, if they went out and arrested white kids for underage drinking the way they arrest black kids for having a little weed in their pocket, the prisons will be full of white kids instead of black ones. And that gives you an idea of how racism works. It's about systems where, for example, among many things, laws are selectively applied, where we say, okay, we're going to be really harsh on black people. If you break the law a little bit, we're going to punish the shit out of you because it is your fault, because you're a bad person. That's why we gave you 80 years in prison for possession of 2 grams of crack cocaine, because you're a bad person. But the white kid down the street, he gets in trouble. He's messing up. He's getting drunk, flipping over cars, burning stuff down. Maybe he raped a girl. Maybe he's used some cocaine. It's like, oh, well, he's just a kid. He made a mistake. We don't want to ruin his life over one mistake. He's got a good lawyer. His dad paid his legal fees because his dad's got that kind of money. He's a member of SAE, so is the judge. So he's going to get probation, right? That's If you really want to look for racism, if you really want to hunt for racism, those are the things you have to hunt for. Don't hunt for the white man who's dumb enough to get caught on video calling black people niggers, because then you're going to miss 99.9% of all the racism that's out there, and that's just a fact. So, the University of Oklahoma, their president, I can't remember his name, I don't have it in front of me, but he did a really bold thing, which I respected. He actually disassociated the fraternity from the from the university. I thought it was a very bold thing. I thought it was, to some extent, very appropriate. To at least teach them a lesson like, look, this kind of behavior is not going to be tolerated. Your privilege is not going to protect you from the consequences of this kind of behavior. However, by disassociating SAE from the University of Oklahoma, to some extent, you may be dealing with a very deep mental illness on your campus, deep social and psychological illness on your campus, by dealing with the cold sore, dealing with the symptoms of that deep illness. So, effectively, I hope that they're not saying, well, now that we've gotten rid of the SAEs, we've gotten rid of racism, because that's not true. Understand the SAEs and this mentality. It's created in an incubator. A psychological and social incubator that creates and breeds racism, and so you can't look at the SAEs without looking at that university. You can't look at that university without looking at the state of Oklahoma. You can't look at the state of Oklahoma without looking at the history of Oklahoma. You can't look at the history of Oklahoma without looking at the history of racial violence that has occurred. For example, the Black Wall Street situation, which people in Oklahoma don't want to talk about. They act like it didn't happen, but guess what? You had in 1921 a whole bunch of black people, over hundreds and hundreds of black people who were very wealthy, doing very well, who had their wealth stolen from them, who were shot dead on their front porches, who were dragged off to jail and had their homes burned down so that whites could burn their stuff down, kill them, and take all their stuff, and there was no accountability. If you talk about structural racism, let's look at the structures that created the incubator within which this racial tragedy was allowed to occur. Number one, you had the media, the newspapers just telling flat out lies every day, basically portraying and framing the situation as, oh, black people, they've gone crazy, they're out of hand, the brave white men are going over there to protect the community from these Neanderthal Negroes. That was the first lie, which incited more of the violence, which justified the violence, and allowed these white men to not only go and become murderous lunatics, rapists, and thieves and all these other things that they were behaving like, but allowed them to come home as heroes at that point. So that's the first institution. What else? White men were being deputized just on the spot. Black men weren't being deputized, they were being incarcerated during the Black Wall Street Massacre. So white men are being deputized on the spot, which means they then have the power of the state behind them, another structure, another racist structure, which allowed them to go into this town and shoot black people on sight, and not a single white man was tried or convicted or anything for what he did. There was no indictment issued whatsoever for any of these murders that occurred on Black Wall Street. We can go even deeper. Once Black Wall Street burned down, whites basically created laws that did not allow them to rebuild. They told them, well, to rebuild buildings, you have to have a certain material. In order to get that material, you've got to come to the white side of town because we're the only ones who are allowed to sell it, and we're not going to sell it to Negroes. Again, another structure, another racist structure, breeding that structural racism, which creates the environment within which racial violence occurs. You can really just keep going down the list. I mean, even to this day, the fact that the state legislature has barely acknowledged what happened at Black Wall Street. They still want to call it a race riot, which is nonsense. I really wanted to say bullshit, but I'm not gonna say bullshit because I don't want to cuss. So instead of saying bullshit, I'm gonna say it was nonsense. That's the thing. If you can't talk about the structural racism that exists in your society, then you aren't really talking about racism. You're talking about the SAEs and them singing a song about niggas and whatever. I mean, I don't care that much about that stuff. Okay, fine, it's wrong. You punish them, you let them know this is not appropriate. But then at that point, maybe you can have a real racial conversation instead of always just scratching at the surface. Because guess what? After this happens, if you don't make any structural changes within your institution over a long period of time, you're going to have this happen again in about 3 or 4 years. When I was at Syracuse University, something like that happened every 2 or 3 years, and the university would be so appalled that these kids would even think that way. Well, guess what? The way your children think is a reflection of you. It's a reflection of their parents. It's a reflection of their educators. It's a reflection of all the people who either guided their thinking or neglected their development of thought. that's what it's a reflection of. So if you can't dig deeper and understand the real root cause of all this racism, then you're gonna miss the point every time. So that's all I want to say. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World. Please take care. God bless. I'm gone. Peace.